Good evening. In this broadcast, the information program Time. Today, the session of the Security Council of Russia was held, and there was one item of discussion at the meeting, preparations for celebrating the 50th anniversary of victory in the Great Patriotic War. It was decided to hold a Veterans March with military subdivisions involved on Red Square and a memorial parade by the Memorial Complex on Poklonная Hill. During examination of the plan of functions, taken into consideration with the desires of veterans, residents of Moscow, proposals of the CIS countries, and participants of the anti-Hitler coalition. Matters of the impending celebration, the Russian leadership resolves on the backdrop of daily concerns. One of them is the delimitation of powers of the center with the subjects of the Federation. Today in the Kremlin, Boris Yeltsin and Aksarбек Galasov signed an agreement on demarcation of powers between Russia and Northern Ossetia, Alania. Speaking at the signing ceremony, Boris Yeltsin noted that this document will comprise the legal basis for the development of Northern Ossetia as a full-fledged member of the Russian Federation. All the contentious issues must be resolved at the dialogue table, and the agreements achieved must be strictly implemented. Aksarбек Galasov, on his hand, underlined that since the moment Northern Ossetia rejoined Russia in 1774, the latter has received in Alania a reliable friend and ally to the south, and currently Northern Ossetia was and remains a component of the great multinational Russia. Today, in the White House, the heads of the governments of Northern Ossetia and Russia signed 6 two-sided economic agreements. Responding to the questions of the press, Viktor Chernomyrdin emphasized that such agreements and treaties are in full correspondence with the Constitution. However, they will be in effect until a federal law is adopted on the manner and principles of demarcation of powers between the center and the subjects of the Federation. Inasmuch as we are ready, we will sign agreements with others until laws are adopted. Hence, Northern Ossetia, on the example of Tatarstan, Bashkortostan, Kabardino-Balkaria, became the 4th subject of the Russian Federation, having a similar agreement with the center. Yet some observers shed doubt on the feasibility of signing such agreements for short term because currently a law is in the final preparatory stages on the manner and principles of delimitation of powers between organs of state rule of Russia and the subjects of the Federation. Sergei Shachrai told our information agency that this law will be submitted for examination by the State Duma in the next few days. Today in Chechnya, federal forces took the city of Argun. They took it without destruction. Alexis Kavets reported this, citing a telegram of the command of the United Federal Forces of Chechnya, the Colonel General Anatoly Kulikov. According to the Center of the Public Communications of the Ministry of Internal Affairs, in liberating Argun, a large quantity of combat technology, weapons, and ammunition was seized. The federal forces' losses are 1 casualty and 9 injuries. Details of preparations of the operation to take Argun are reported by special correspondent Nikolai Shulbakov. All the attention of the federal forces is glued today to Argun. This city is located only a 20-minute ride from Grozny. Here, a large group of gunmen entrenched itself, equipped not only with firearms, but with armored troop carriers and tanks. So as not to subject the city to artillery fire and bombings, the command of the federal forces offered the gunmen to leave Argun, but received a refusal, after which an ultimatum was issued during 12 hours to relinquish their weapons and to leave the city. But even this action did not yield the desired result. Then the cannonade began to speak. The helicopters lifted off into the air. Units of federal forces at an established time from the north and from the south locked the circle around Argun today. In the opinion of the commander of the internal forces in Grozny, the disarmament of the unlawful formations is necessary to conduct, if possible, with minimum losses. The announcement of taking of Argun served as confirmation of the statement of Alexis Kavets. The main objective currently is to restore constitutional order in Chechnya, and it's being pursued quite consecutively. Further, a state commission, according to its designation, concerned with the problems of the economy and life of the people in Chechnya. Especially detailed was the account of providing bread in Chechnya. The first vice premier said that bread is baked in the city in insufficient quantities and of low quality. The mission was assigned to resolve the problem within a month. Now, bread is distributed free of charge in Grozny. Alexis Kavets feels that there could be more just and honest distribution only through a normal trade process, which must be planned for the near future. Payment of salary to all workers must also be organized within a month. The concern of the Federal Immigration Service is to aid refugees. At today's session, Alexis Kavits expressed the point of view that it's preferable to do all possible for the return of people, including Russians, to former residences and avoid a flood of emigration from Chechnya. An important step in restoring constitutional organs of power in Chechnya was undertaken by the President of Russia. In the decree he signed, the decision of the Interim Council of Chechnya supported to create a Committee of National Accord chaired by Umar Avturkhanov. This organ is delegated development of a draft constitution for Chechnya and preparation of elections. The executive power until adoption of a new basic law will be the function of the Government of National Rebirth, which is headed by Salambek Hadjiev. And now the situation in Crimea. Crimean Parliament proposed today that the Parliament of Ukraine postpone the date of elections of local organs of power on the peninsula from April to May, and hence extend the terms of the local councils of the current term. The future process of elections will be conducted in strict compliance with the laws of Ukraine, the Crimean parliamentarians assure in their resolution. Today, the Supreme Soviet of Crimea again returned to the question of delegations for the delegation for the talks with Ukrainian Parliament. The deputies doubted whether there is any sense to send such a delegation if it's not expected in Kiev, and what proposals will it take with it. They decided not to rush and prepare it more thoroughly. For that same reason, the proposal to immediately dispatch the delegation to the State Duma was not supported. Today, the government of Crimea submitted its resignation. The new Prime Minister, Anatoly Drobot, asked the deputies for time to form a new structure. He was given until Monday. Meanwhile, the Minister of Justice of Ukraine prepared a clarification of the fact that the relinquishing of the post of Prime Minister by Anatoly Franchuk and the Vice Premier Andrei Senchenko contradicts the Constitution and the legislation of Ukraine. The situation on the streets and in public places of Simferopol remains calm as before. Only by the Supreme Soviet building, picketing continues in defense of the statehood of Crimea. The Deputy Minister of Internal Affairs of Ukraine, Valery Chernyshov, told the press that a new group of officers of the Ministry of Internal Affairs of Ukraine has arrived in Crimea, and also 200 troops of the Berkut Special Division. But they have one mission, that is to help Crimean militia in the battle with organized crime. The work of the Russian consulate employees in Simferopol, who are processing papers for Russian citizenship, is agreed upon with Ukraine. This was stated by the Ministry of Internal Affairs and Foreign Affairs of Ukraine, but in their opinion, this action is not so much of a legal as a political nature, because the process demonstrates the mood of Crimeans, that is, their leanings toward Russia. I'll remind you that pursuant to legislation of Ukraine, the residents can't have dual citizenship. Those who have filed for Russian citizenship in Ukraine acquire foreign or alien status. High-placed employees of the Ministry of Internal Affairs of Ukraine reported that in 3 months in Ukraine, new passports will begin to be issued. Individuals who refused Ukrainian citizenship will receive a residence permit instead of a passport. This question, among other problems in Russian-Ukrainian relations, was touched on today at the press conference by Alexis Kavits. The desire of the organizers of the press conference of Alexis Kavits to expand the circle of topics generated no enthusiasm among the press. All were interested in only one question about Russian-Ukrainian relations. Listing, as is appropriate, the documents signed and prepared for signing at a high level, the Vice Premier especially dwelt on the restructuring of the Ukrainian debt, which has exceeded $2.5 billion. In accordance with the agreements, it will be liquidated over the course of 10 years, and in the event of late payment of more than 2 weeks, Moscow may claim appropriate percentages and annul all agreements. The conditions are extremely strict. Especially painful for both sides was the question on the position of the Russian government vis-à-vis Crimea, and criticism was heard in this connection in the State Duma. In response, Alexis Kavits confirmed the words that Moscow does not intend to force on its own decisions in this matter. Moreover, he said that the formulation of dual citizenship was removed from the text, which was submitted for review by the presidents of Russia and Ukraine. In exchange, Moscow offers agreements signed with Belarus and Kazakhstan by which a person continuing to reside in a republic may take on Russian citizenship. The Vice Premier felt improbable that he would participate in parliamentary hearings on Crimea. I'm now speaking before you, and specifically with an answer for those deputies who are interested in everything which is occurring in our relations between Russia and Ukraine. These statements made by Zatulin I read in the newspapers as well. The session of parliament in Belarus was turbulent today. Evidently, Belarusian parliament decided not to surrender without a fight. After Alexander Lukashenko suddenly appeared in the session's auditorium, reminded about his insistent proposal that the deputies step down from power, Belarusian parliament turned into a disturbed beehive. Those present increased the intensity through various interpretations of the Basic Law, where it's written, incidentally, in black and white, that the powers of the deputies will end at that moment when the new parliament assumes these seats. Meanwhile, the 5-year term of the current Supreme Soviet expires in March. Consciously evading the question about self-suspension, the deputies began to discuss the initiative of the president to hold a referendum, seemingly having decided in retaliation to drown this question in discussions in which the very possibility was rejected of raising questions of national symbolism and the equality of the Belarusian and Russian languages. The President of Russia today signed a decree directed at the battle with manifestations of fascism and political extremism in Russia. The President gave concrete instructions to the government, the Prosecutor General's Office, Ministry of Internal Affairs, the FSK, and other competent services to adopt all necessary measures to battle these phenomena. On the day this decree was signed, Alexei Videnkin, who has called himself the deputy head of the nationalistic organization Russian National Unity, was released from under guard. Videnkin signed a consent to house arrest. We'll remind you, he's incriminated by the 207th statute of the Criminal Code of Russia, the threat of murder. Change in the work of the Prosecutor General is a realized need. Even until now, we have a standard system of the judicial coordinate, and it is the criminal code of the Russian Soviet Federative Socialist Republic, in which, in black and white, the statute of betrayal against the long-expired Soviet Union is written in. One of the most ancient rules of good tone is restriction of information, and if changes in Russian legislation the prosecutor sees in the distant future, then to launch general repairs since 1936 in our own house and to open the doors for journalists turned out to be completely possible. Briefings such as today's are a type of report on the performance of organs of internal affairs in the year 1994 and promised to become permanent. Journalists were provided with information about the ratio of solved against unsolved crimes, the monitoring of abiding by laws, so that mass media could correctly interpret the position of the prosecutor. In the end of the briefing, a statement was made that Gennady Ponomaryov submitted a notice of resignation from the prosecutor's office of his own desire because of retiring at an appropriate age. And probably the lawsuit filed by the union will not be reviewed by the court because the object of contention has been removed. Later, in conversation with the press, the head of the department monitoring the investigation of crimes, Vladimir Kirakozov, also favorably remembered the lopsided deputy immunity. Not in any country of the world, he emphasized, does the deputy mandate give such a reliable immunity against investigative organs. According to existing facts, against each fourth national deputy, criminal charges were filed unsuccessfully for all types of violations, from financial machinations to being accomplices in murder. The most outstanding examples are the deputies Skorichkin and Mavrodin. Regarding the investigation of Latlistiev's murder, he said the following: today, 8 more experienced criminologists joined the investigative team, and they've questioned already more than 400 witnesses, and the investigation has begun to question journalists writing about the death of their colleague as witnesses. The panel of the Prosecutor General's office today recommended to the post of prosecutor of Moscow, Sergei Gerasimov. The final appointment of Gerasimov to the post of Moscow prosecutor will be confirmed by the acting Prosecutor General of Russia, Alexei Yushchenko, after agreeing on the candidacy with Yuri Lushkov. Boris Yeltsin in the Kremlin today held a business meeting with the heads of the Council on Judicial Reform under the President of Russia. Participants discussed concrete measures to coordinate actions of the federal authorities for a more dynamic judicial reform within the country. In the Constitutional Court of Russia today, the first decision in the last 1.5 years was announced. Today, the Constitutional Court of Russia ratified the tenet of the Basic Law that the Federative Council should begin examination of priority laws no later than 2 weeks after they have been received from the State Duma. At the same time, the resolution of the court provides that even if the 2 weeks is not sufficient, the upper chamber of Parliament may continue examination of laws at its next session. From the Chronicle of Occurrences, at least 13 people have died and 14 more are in critical condition and taken to hospital as a result of an accident on the Tagaran-Rodsk metallurgical plant. There, in the tube rolling manufacturing facility, 4 steel concrete beams of the roof collapsed. At that moment in the building, there were around 30 people. Searching for the rest is the Accident Rescue Brigade of the Ministry of Emergency Situations. Exactly 1 year has passed since the crash of the Aerobus A310 in the Kemerovo district, when 75 people died. Today, a special commission investigating causes of the tragedy publicized its conclusive act. It was established. The catastrophe occurred because of the inadequate actions of the crew, caused by the presence of unauthorized persons in the pilot's cabin, and because of the absence of warning signalization for the turning off of the automatic pilot. In the final act, the Commission noted the flight crew's insufficient knowledge of rules for operating a foreign aircraft. Today, the director of the Service of Foreign Intelligence of Russia, Yevgeny Primakov, held a press conference about the state of affairs with the agreement on non-proliferation of nuclear weapons. He expressed several predictions regarding overcoming the complications which arose in the last years connected with the potentials of several countries to become uncontrolled possessors of nuclear weapons. The agreement on non-proliferation of nuclear weapons was opened for signing and took effect the 5th of March 1970. Now, as participants of it are 172 countries. 25 years which have passed since then saw significant changes in this matter in the world. Specifically, the spread of nuclear weapons was not stopped by the agreement, although it was slowed down. The Foreign Intelligence Service of Russia says that apart from the current 5 members of the nuclear club, there are at least 3 more unofficial nuclear nations. There are such countries whom the Foreign Intelligence Service feels are threshold or pre-threshold, that is, those who have sufficiently closely approached possession of nuclear weapons. However, Russia's Foreign Intelligence Service, whose report was given to the Security Council of Russia today, and personally to the President and government, feels the agreement is a beneficial document without which today in the world there would already be 20 nuclear nations, and making recommendations to the delegation of Russia at the conference in New York in 1 month on the fate of the agreement, states unequivocally that the most acceptable fate of this agreement would be its immediate extension. Or the most undesirable outcome of events in his predictions about the conference, Yevgeny Primakov feels, is the version when certain countries of radical leaning could attempt to turn the impending conference into a field of political battle. This could place the conference into stalemate. This scenario is the most unacceptable. At the conference, of course, the question about the dramatic events connected with the poisoning of a large number of passengers in the Tokyo metro was not avoided. All 3 high-placed officials of the Foreign Intelligence Service of Russia said that the version that the sarin-producing technology came from the territory of Russia was examined, and all speculation on this account is complete fabrication. Meanwhile, in Japan, the search of the building of the main stronghold of the sect of the Teaching of Truth, Aum, has begun, which has been accused of committing that terrorist act. In the case of the Aon Shinrikyo, the Japanese sect, which was known by the name the Teaching of Truth Aon in our country, the Russian track appears more and more clearly. In Japan, the sect has received an extremely unfavorable reputation. Its actions are always accompanied by forced kidnappings or even disappearances of people, chemical smells from obscure laboratories, and even dealings in toxic substances. Many presume that the use of sarin by the terrorists in the Tokyo metro is connected with the activities of the sect. During these days, I constantly have to explain to Japanese journalists that, for example, Moscow radio is not a propaganda organ for Aon Shinrikyo, but only a neighbor using Russian airwaves. Just now, on radio from Russia, Shogo Asaharo informed his followers in Japan that the time has come to rise to his defense and not to fear death. According to Asaharo's predictions, the world should perish in a war in the year 1997, and only his disciples will survive. How can one understand such an appeal in this context, especially if it comes from Moscow? The tragedy in the Tokyo metro seriously alarmed the world community, and the postulates and activities of the Aon Shinrikyo in turning youth into zombies literally generated shock in various parts, especially in Russia, where the sect, according to the heads of its Moscow branch, has recruited 30,000 young people. This is 3 times more than in Japan itself. In Moscow alone, there are 6 centers of the criminal sect operating. They exist in the suburbs and even in Vladikavkaz. Their so-called work in our country, the sectarians, began in the year 1992. And what is curious that in March of that year, the founder of the Teaching of the Truth, Aum, that is the name of the sect translated from Japanese, was received by Ruslan Khaspolatov, who welcomed this noble mission of the then unknown Japanese preacher. Sioko Asahara met then also with certain very influential figures in Russian leadership of the year 1992. Through the casual acceptance by the ex-speaker, Aung San Suu Kyi unfolded in Russia. It existed on donations and contributions from commercial entities such as the middleman company, the White Lotus, and the roof repair firm Krovin Tex, and also from membership dues. If one considers that according to its bylaws, each member entering the sect must give over all his property and money, it's not difficult to imagine what a sum this amounted to. Sufficient to say that during the search in the organization's headquarters in Tokyo, in the personal safe of the godfather of the new teaching alone, 700 million yen was found. That's more than $7 million, and 10 kilograms of golden ingots. And how much is in the bank accounts? It's not surprising, therefore, that Aung San Suu Kyi did not spare funds for propagating its ideas. And in Russia, they were also provided the airtime on the television channel 2x2 and radio station Mayak. As the correspondent of Vitortas told us from Tokyo, on the night of the 23rd of March from Russia, the address of the only man in Japan who's achieved total enlightenment was heard, that is Asahara, who called his followers, I quote, to prepare for death without repentance, unquote. The director of broadcasting to Japan of the radio station Voice of Russia said that his department did not broadcast that statement, but expressed the presumption that could have been broadcast from Vladivostok. The announcement that Aung San Suu Kyi would not be broadcast any longer on Mayak was announced by the General Director of Central Radio Broadcasting of Russia, Anatoly Tupikin. But the question remains, if not the tragedy in Tokyo, would the deception of our youth have continued? To this day, in the mornings on television screens, one may see other visiting preachers of various sects and religions. Although television channels receive substantial money for this, and they say money has no scent, the odor comes from other sources, such as sarin gas, which on Monday was used to poison passengers on the Tokyo Metro. In Geneva, the talks between Andrei Kozyrev and the American Secretary of State Warren Christopher have come to a close. The main topics of discussion between the two leaders of the Foreign Affairs Departments were preparations for the Russian-American summit. Iraq has assessed the invasion of Turkish troops as a violation of its sovereignty and demanded their immediate withdrawal. The representative of the Iraq Foreign Affairs called this operation by Turkish forces as an American plot. The armed operation against the Kurdish rebels in the north of Iraq is Turkey's contribution to the battle with terrorism. This is the opinion of the Prime Minister of the country, Tansu Çiller. She expressed confidence that this action would not isolate Turkey from the rest of the world. In Romania, social tension is growing. In Bucharest alone, during this week, workers demonstrated in the streets 3 times. Today, their protest marches, especially numerous, thousands in columns, have almost paralyzed traffic in the capital. We want to work and live in dignity. The right of the unions is written in the Constitution. To stop prices and not salaries, it says on the banners. The workers demand the recent decision of government be revoked, which rigidly regulates the growth of salaries, but forbids the heads of state companies to hold dialogues with the unions on salary increases. The government has its own view of the problem. The Prime Minister Nicolae Vocoroni denied that today the standard of living is even lower than during Ceausescu. However, the reasons for the union's protest he sees in the fact that many companies can't adapt to the market economy and provide their workers with normal income. Who's right, who's wrong? The Parliament will have to decide, where a request to cancel the decision of government was sent by the leading unions of Romania. Protest marches and rallies, apart from Bucharest, today were held in 22 other cities of the country. The Queen of Great Britain has affirmed her country's readiness in the entire Commonwealth to support South Africa in building a non-racial society. During her South African tour, she visited the city, Port Elizabeth, and there were also curious incidents. The Organization of the Azan Peoples demanded that Elizabeth II part with her Great Star of Africa, which embellishes the English crown. In the opinion of this left radical bloc movement, this originated in the bowels of South Africa. One of the world's largest diamonds should be returned to its peoples. According to school tradition, the coming of spring in Poland is celebrated by missing classes, the Day of Truants, and that's what its unofficial name is. But if in strict socialistic times everything led to en masse attendance of cinema, during the last years, the Day of the Truant has spread out to the streets and is accompanied often by merry and at times unsafe gregariousness and extends almost to 2 days. This day, the police feel, is one of the most tense ones of the year. As usual, they have received instructions not to demonstrate force nor provoke the youth by their presence, and at the same time, not to allow anarchy to reign on the streets and squares. The Education Department has also demanded the impossible from teachers to restrain students and keep them in schools. They have organized speeches by popular politicians, all types of competitions, even picnics, but few were lured in by their teachers' enticements. The majority of them are here to occupy the idle truants and lure them away from stores and bars. Since morning, in many parks and culture homes, free concerts are being staged. This is the Spring Rock Festival. The most popular groups are performing. And how long will they be able to keep the youth around them? And although the Day of the Truant is accompanied by unavoidable losses, mostly automobile windows are the casualties, 7 out of all 10 polls greet this celebration of student liberty of spirit and remember what enjoyment it was to escape from under the scrutiny of adults for at least a brief time, for the first day of spring. Few people know about the existence of the International Association of Women Police, and meanwhile it has turned 80 years old, and this organization has held its first Congress in Petersburg. First, we thought of a title for this report, The Lady Shoots First, thinking that such an advantage may be enjoyed by a woman in epaulets not just on the 8th of March, but there never was any shooting. The Congress, under the motto Police, Women and Humanism, which was attended by female representatives of law enforcement from the near and distant abroad, and of course Russia, went by completely peacefully. At the plenary session, in small groups or over a cup of coffee, the colleagues discussed a broad circle of questions and even the role of women in society. There, in conditions of Western democracy, women police also have problems, but fewer than ours. Here's Raya Kurachkina. She's almost the only woman inspector of the Petersburg City Police. For months and years of her duty in wind and rain and snow, she has no advantages compared to men, and perhaps that's why all her friends in the division have long ago taken up calmer forms of work. The opening of the anniversary exhibit in the Tretyakov Gallery, of course, is a sign of recognition. Incidentally, the art and sculpture of Alexander Burganov, the national artist of Russia, in the art of the 20th century occupies an honorary position which was long ago recognized by specialists and reaffirmed by exhibits not just in Russia but in Canada, France, England, Germany, and other countries. His works, particularly of the latter years, are like a cry of the soul, the insight, clairvoyance of the master, gifted with the ability to penetrate the essence of an object or life. The tumultuous, tortuous rhythms of his self-portrait, and often the classical perfection of female images. Before me stands a muse. I recognized her immediately. Its face imparted a special light. She lifted her fingers and touched my eyes. Burganov is not just a prominent sculptor of our times. He's a fine graphic artist, poet, and essayist, polemicist. The lines of his prose are written on the Plaxenus Auditorium. He's a philosopher who, in sculpture, is trying to express most of all thought and feeling. And following the plastic beauty of his amazing three-dimensional works, a real sign of an artist, you seem to open up the fourth dimension of your soul. The birds of the heart, tragically struggling, unable to leave its cage destined for it by Providence, before your eyes becomes a plea for help. Deep in sleep, this sculpture is called a dream. One gains a sense of flight, of a restless but restricted space. For me, art is a means of self-knowledge, which studies good and evil and oneself. In our stormy and insane world, what does good mean to you? That means to treat others honestly and honorably, and respect for one's neighbor. And about one more Moscow exhibit, the tourism exhibit. Tourism is not just entertaining voyages, vacation, and at times a useful purchase. It's also an industry which flourishes in many countries of the world. Last year, Greece alone from tourism received more than $12 billion. At this exhibit, we hope to attract the attention of even more Russians to our country. We have lots to see. This is not just ancient Athens or the Thessalonica resorts, but many other cities. The development of tourism is of great focus in many countries of the world, and not by coincidence, this exhibit, organized by Expo Center, generated enormous interest among Muscovites and guests of the capital. Hundreds of tourist firms and companies offer trips to almost all corners of the world. They offering services to organize trips are Russian tourist firms as well, although their prices, as a rule, are significantly higher than their foreign competitors. Mainly, they offer foreign trips, or only individuals are involved in developing tourism and vacationing in their own country. These are more the exception than the rule, and it's a shame because we have much to see and places to improve health. Good evening. The sports news, and first the information of the last hour. In the International Hockey League, today the response quarter matches were held. In Taliati, the Lada beat the Nizhegorod Torpedoes 3-0 and became the first in the semifinals. In Omsk, Avangard beat Dynamos 5-2, and now everything will depend on the third match tomorrow. The Torpedo Yaroslava Salavat Yulev, the basic time tie is 2-2, and currently overtime is underway. Wings of the Soviets lost to the Metallurgists from Magnitogorsk 2-4 and are out of the battle now. Now Metallurgist will meet with Lada. The major tennis tournament is underway in the American Key Biscayne. At the men's Lipton tournament, two semi-finalists are already known. They are Magnus Larsson and Andre Agassi, who beat Wayne Ferrer in 2 sets. In general, Agassi currently is in excellent athletic form. He literally flew about the courts, and Ferrer couldn't provide any obstacles. In the quarterfinals of the women's Key Biscayne tournaments, Natalia Zvereva was very close to victory in the match with Steffi Graf, but Graf's class prevailed, and in the semifinals of the women's Lipton's championships, Steffi Graf will meet Jana Novotná Gabriela Sabatini with Kimi Kadata. After an almost 3-year break, Monica Seles is again beginning to train. Specialists say that she has recovered psychologically completely after the flesh injury sustained after the assault by a tennis fanatic at the tournament in Hamburg. Soon, possibly in the spring, she'll play in one of the upcoming tournaments. On Saturday, the 25th of March, from the Indiana U.S. Center Prison, the former world boxing professional champion in the super heavyweight category, Mike Tyson, will be released. He was sentenced to 6 years in prison after having been accused and found guilty of rape, but for good behavior he was freed in advance and conditionally. In Tyson's plans is a return to the ring and a match with George Foreman, Evander Holyfield and Lennox Lewis. Before the weather report, a report about those who bring us those weather reports. It's a shame that there were no reports done on meteorologists. And today many countries in the world are celebrating International Meteorological Day. Hanging over Russia almost all winter was an ozone gap. Currently it's shrinking and gradually moving to the sparsely populated regions of eastern Siberia. Meteorologists predict that by summer it will vanish completely, although there is no guarantee that in 1 year the hole won't form again. But it's not Russia's fault at all, as no other concrete country is responsible. These are global processes which know no political borders. Everyone to a degree dumps chemical substances into the air which contribute to destroying the ozone layer. Industry, however, has already recognized the danger and is gradually reducing harmful productivity, but developing countries for now have no choice. Incidentally, today meteorologists are more concerned with hurricanes, floods and droughts which cause damage to the world economy to the tune of $30 billion per year. One can't conquer nature, but to prepare well in advance for its turns, humanity is now capable. 5-day forecasts now have a probability of precisiveness of 85%. This is in many ways because of the fact that weather satellites rotate and circle the Earth. Russia launched a geostation, Electra, last year. In the near future, will assume the leading role in the world space network. And there is confidence that by the beginning of the next millennium, no weather phenomenon will catch a single region of the Earth off guard. Hello. Today, as you probably already know, is the International Meteorology Day. On this occasion, I was invited to the evening broadcast of the weather forecast. I congratulate all ocean meteorologists of Russia and my foreign colleagues on the occasion. For more than 100 years, there's international cooperation among meteorologists to protect people, their properties from dangerous weather phenomenon. The International Meteorological Organization annually defines a motto for that day, and this year the motto is Meteorological Service for the Population. Daily, millions of people in the world watch television, listen to the radio, read newspapers to learn about the weather. But human dependence on the weather is reflected in ancient legends, stories, and manuscripts. The first scientific treatise was written by Aristotle in the 4th century BC. But what has changed since then? Paradoxically, but human dependence on weather has increased. We now have airplanes. Their safety depends on the weather. We have ocean liners, communications systems, and finally buses and trolleybuses, which can't even move during an ice storm or a blizzard. The entire Earth is built up, populated, and crops fear frosts and droughts. In a word, it's more difficult to list those not interested in the weather than those who need to know. But we'll return to today's motto. Our mission is to forewarn against danger phenomena of the weather. We also need preciseness of the forecast. In order to preserve the harvest in time, take a vacation or go fishing. The system of preparing the forecasts is a very complicated international system which demands great efforts, labor, and means. But no less important is to report the forecast on time to those who need to know. Therefore, today I'd like to congratulate television workers, journalists, and others who cooperate with the Federal Russian Oceanic Meteorological Center and the Environmental Monitoring Center. Regarding the forecast for tomorrow, the maps which hang behind me were so legible that probably there is no need to repeat the information. I'll just remind you that tomorrow in Moscow it will be partly cloudy. During the day, some light rain is possible. At night, 0 - 2 degrees. During the day, +5 to 7 degrees. Thank you.